Don't take it personally if I like go to look in the middle of this just to make sure it's still recording.
So, like, leave?
No, just no.
Like, leave and look from the window inside?
Don't take it personally if I just leave the interview.
I thought we were gonna like step out of the car and like look at the screen from the glass. Dad, I'm trying to tell you about the time my parents died.
Keep going, it's rolling.
It was an offer I couldn't refuse. It was too good to be true. It would have been one of those things where if I had turned it down, I would spend the rest of my life wondering what if. So I figured, fuck it. I have nothing to lose. I mean, I was going to be working on my artwork anyways and essentially doing the same work or building on the work that I've been creating in my practice for some time now, just on my own accord. So I might as well get paid for it and come out of it with a doctorate at the end, which is insane.
How did you hear about the opportunity?
It more so came knocking on my door.
How did that happen?
Which is even more exciting. I had been invited to speak at a conference in Mexico in the fall. And at the same time, my artwork was being exhibited at a contemporary museum in Mexico City. So I show up to Mexico, and the Airbnb that they had booked for us was like a dream. I couldn't believe it. It felt like I was walking into like this castle, like its own little like island, and just like beautiful trees and like this lush garden like at this entrance, like through this gate. And it was like a mansion. There was maybe 7 of us, I think, staying in the space, but the place was so big that like you didn't even know that there were other people in that house with you. Like, it was huge. I could not believe, like, it was a villa. It was like a posh villa. And I was like, oh my God, what is my life? Like, how did I end up here? It was insane. I got to spend the week with some amazing artists and scientists and curators and just really interesting people who in some way or another were involved in arts, culture, technology, or science. And I met this woman. Her name is Kathy High, and she's a prolific artist. Her work is really infamous in the contemporary bioart circle, nationally and internationally. And we just like rubbed up against each other, and she really liked my work. She really wanted me to consider applying for my PhD, but specifically applying for my PhD at RPI, the university that I'm going to, and she just kept pursuing me about it. And you know what? I said no at first.
Why?
I was hesitant because I was in the midst of my MFA and I was very overwhelmed. Like, that's a whole, like, it's a really big undertaking on its own. And I was going into my final semester and just felt like I needed to give myself a bit of a mental and emotional break in between going from one graduate degree to like another equally serious and more strenuous one. So I said, thank you, but no thank you. And she reached out again. And so I said, you know what? Okay, I'll play along. I have nothing to lose. I'll go see the campus. I'm going to be nearby during the Christmas holiday, visiting my family. I'll be a few hours away. I'll take a day trip, go see what it's like, and I'll just
feel it from there.
Go from there. There's no sense in like ruling it out right away, right? So during the Christmas holiday, my sister and I took a day trip out to Troy, New York to visit the campus. And I couldn't believe how beautiful it was. Like, it had this very like Hogwartsy feel. Like, the buildings were like these beautiful old relics, but they were like maintained, but still had their like old school charm. And I met a lot of the current PhD candidates. So had I applied and had I been accepted or whatever, they would have been like my colleagues and people in my cohort that are just a few years ahead of me in the program. So I got to have lunch with those people, met some faculty, and I really got this like feeling of like, I could see myself here.
Yes.
So I started working on the PhD application, but that is also like super stressful and it's quite an exhausting undertaking. Like, there's so much writing and so much thinking, and you have to put together a very extensive portfolio, and it's a lot of work. And so I had started working on it and I overwhelmed myself. And I felt like, you know what? I'm already feeling this anxious and this overwhelmed just by the application process.
So maybe it's not a good sign.
So maybe this is a sign that I need to just like pump the brakes and take a step back and reevaluate or reconsider in a year, or when I feel like I've given myself enough of that mental and emotional break that I really need. So yeah, I probably got like halfway through the application and I said, you know what, I can't do this. And the applications were due January 1st. So I reached out to Kathy and I thanked her profusely and apologized for taking up her time, but feeling like I needed to step away from it. And there was no harm, no foul. Like, she was very understanding. And she made it a point to just remind me that, you know, the program will still be here in a year or two or whatever if I choose to apply. And that was very comforting. And so January 1st came and went, and
So
the deadline passed, and I forgot about it. And I had, like, you know, started thinking about the other things in my life and the other things that I needed to accomplish. And probably 2 weeks into the new year, so again, like, it had been 2 weeks since the deadline had passed, and I remember this timeline so vividly. It was a Wednesday. It was a Wednesday afternoon. Kathy sends me an email and she says, "Hey Jude, I know you said that you didn't want to like apply and you wanted to take some time and whatever, and I totally support that." You know, like, she was being very supportive in her writing. "But I just wanted to let you know that we've extended the application deadline, but it's due this Friday at midnight." And so at this point, it's like, oh, okay, like, this was a Wednesday afternoon.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking, okay, that's good to know, but like, that's like not even 2 days away.
Right.
And like, that's...
You're already feeling overwhelmed from having...
And that's not a long time to like put together a serious like PhD application. So I don't think I had given it much thought then. It was almost like a knee-jerk reaction. I responded to her email probably like an hour after she had sent her original email letting me know of that extension, and I said, again, thanks but no thanks. And I just sort of like let it go. But she didn't plant a seed in my head. Like, she planted a bomb.
Okay.
And it just like went off.
What does that mean?
The next day. Like, just the thing just like went off in my head that was like, oh my God, what the fuck are you doing? Like, the universe is like knocking at your door so many times. And you keep like shooing it away. Like, at this point, you have no... Again, like, I have nothing to lose.
Right.
Like, I'm just gonna put my name in the hat and just see what happens.
Right.
And I sat on it and kept thinking about it for those 2 days. And then finally Friday rolls around and I hadn't done anything about it. I've just been like sitting and like stewing and like, what do I do? What does it mean? What is my life? What is my direction? You know, just like overthinking the heck out of it. And so Friday rolls around, and at this point, it's also like Friday afternoon. It's like Friday at like 4 or 5 p.m. And I'm like, you know what? That's it. I'm not going to keep thinking about it. I'm just going to sit myself down, and I'm going to do it, and I'm going to throw my name in the hat, and I'm going to forget about it. And whatever happens, happens. At least that way, I won't have this incessant feeling of like, what does it mean? And what is this? And what if? And whatever. Like, I'm just going to do it, and whatever comes, I'll deal with it when it comes. So I locked myself in my studio, turned my phone off, like, just cut myself out of the world for however much time I had left until midnight. And I've never typed so fast in my entire life.
Smoke is coming off the keys.
Okay, you know that meme of Kermit at the typewriter where he's just going fucking insane? That was me. And I don't even know what was coming out of me. It was just like...
raw.
Just whatever. And I somehow, I don't know, I still don't know how I managed to do it, but like 11:58, I submitted my application. And I probably, once I hit the submit button, I just like sat in my chair, just like, oh my God. Like, what have I done? I couldn't tell, like, I don't know what I wrote. Because I had no time to go back and like revise and review. But it was the things that I knew inherently in myself, the things that I had been researching and studying and exploring for like 2 years, like from my core. So, I don't know. I must have done something right. And so, I would say about a month and a half later, I got an acceptance letter, which is super exciting and super validating because a lot of the work that I used to submit for like in my PhD application was based off of the work that I had been currently doing and making in my MFA. So that alone is like very validating. It's like, hey, well, I'm obviously doing something right. I'm obviously on the right trajectory. There's people that see merit in my work, etc., etc. So that was great. But the problem with the acceptance is I can't afford going to this university. It's extremely expensive. And even just dealing with the transition and the relocation and all of that, like there's so many layers to it.
Another country.
Yeah, it's just like so many layers. So I had this like exciting, like congratulatory letter in front of me, and I'm like,
what was it like when that came in? Bittersweet. Yeah.
Very. Because on the one hand, I'm like, oh, fuck yeah, like I got in, this is amazing, like isn't this what I wanted? But then on the other hand, I'm like, oh shit, now what does this mean? And so the way that I don't know how it works in if this is the same for like all university institutions, but for RPI they would offer you either an acceptance or a rejection to whatever program, and then if you're eligible for like funding of any sorts, that information comes later. Oh. So it's like exciting, but also it doesn't mean anything. Yeah. Like, and for me, in my current situation, this acceptance meant nothing, because unless I had like full ride, full funding in my hand, I'm not going. Right. And even if they gave me like partial funding, which is the most common type of funding that they allocate for like incoming candidates, that's great, but it's not enough. Like, it's way too expensive, and I can't justify putting myself into that much financial debt. Like, it's just not smart. So, you know, then I have to sit there and wait and wait and wait, like agonizingly wait to hear if I got the money or not. And then lo and behold, I got full funding, which is so rare, like so rare, especially on that level, like on a PhD level, it's really difficult. So
what would you attribute that to? Why do you think you got full funding for it?
You know what? I got full funding for a number of reasons. One, I asked for it.
Ah, I love that.
I straight up said in my application, like, my intent is to apply for this PhD electronic arts program with full funding. I was very explicit in what I wanted. And I think if I hadn't made that explicit, I think I would have gotten funding. I just don't think I would have gotten full funding.
That's amazing.
And I made that request explicit because it's like, here I am putting myself out there, taking this seriously. And if you're equally serious about me as a candidate, then
here's what you need to know.
Here's what I need. If I'm not getting full funding, I'm not coming. Not because I don't want to come, but I cannot come. So that was the first thing. And that was a very terrifying ask.
It's bold.
It's very bold, and it puts you in a very vulnerable position to just say flat out, here's what I need, here's what I want. Because there's always like a moment of rejection, and that fear of rejection is a true fear. But I had to put that aside. I had to put my ego aside, and I had to put that fear aside if I really wanted to give this a true, like, honest try. And not wonder what if down the line. Because I think if I had gotten accepted but didn't get full funding, and had I not written it into my letters that I needed funding, I would have always wondered,
what if I asked?
What if I asked? Like, maybe
that's
would
amazing
that have
that you
changed
thought
something?
of that with all that your Kermit the Frog typing, and you still managed to. I guess you would have been very clear that that's what the case was. So.
Yeah.
And what were the other reasons?
So that was one of the reasons. I think the other reason is because the work that I'm doing is giving a voice and like contribution to a totally different perspective that doesn't really exist in contemporary bioart. So I'm sort of like paving the way for a new voice and a new generation and a new perspective that isn't Eurocentric, a new perspective in the arts that takes into account an immigrant experience. Yeah, and like a racial experience. And that does exist in the arts, but in the context of bioart and the type of work that my art is centered in, it doesn't really exist. So it's really pushing that boundary, and I think it's sort of like a win-win for both parties, where it's sort of like bragging rights, you know? It's like everyone wants to be able to say that they were one of the first to have done this or accomplished that or whatever. And so if my work gets to that stature, then RPI gets to say she's a PhD candidate or graduate from our institution, and we were the ones who gave her the platform. And so I think pitching it in that way was very smart on my part. But it's true. So
got it.
I think those were, I think that was why I got what I wanted.
Right. And so it's like, it makes me smile because it's like, I feel like people can go so far sometimes when they're so niche at something, when it's like such a specific thing that they become known for that thing. So
I don't want to pigeonhole myself, but right now I am in a very niche space.
Like, and it's like you're a niche within a niche.
And I'm milking it.
Hey,
I think you just have to play smart in those situations.
Right.
And I've sort of like found my voice in a way, or have come into my voice a little bit better. But I think that just comes with time and experience, and also like putting yourself out there and getting rejected and trying and not letting that one idea or like falsified sense of failure get in the way or inhibit your progress. I have to always remind myself that I'm still moving. I'm still making steps, and I'm still making progress. It might not seem like major, or, you know, everyone wants to get to the end goal. And not that people don't want to put in the work, but it's like you get so excited by the thought of getting to the end that you just want to gloss over everything else to get there. And so it feels like all these like little moments, even though they can be significant when you're looking at it in hindsight, in that moment it doesn't feel like much. So I feel like I'm constantly having to negotiate with myself and remind myself that I am making progress and I am making moves, no matter how small it may seem or how slow it may seem. I'm still getting there. So
and for people who don't know, which I think might be a good amount of people, what is
maybe
bioart?
We should preface, like, what is it?
Let's start with bioart. What is it?
Bioart is a very contemporary form of art making, and the way I describe it, or I mean, anyone you talk to is going to describe it differently in that circle, but I think of it as the intersection of art and science, and it's sort of like this gray area of using science as a means to produce art, and art sometimes as a means to produce science or like scientific discovery, and they sort of like work hand in hand. Whereas traditionally we've been taught that science is its own silo and art is its own, and there isn't this cross-section or an in-between, and it's that gray area that really, in my mind, is where bioart is centered. And so, for example, instead of working with like traditional media, like maybe using charcoal to make a drawing or acrylic paint to make a painting or whatever, you can collaborate with life forms, you can work with plants, you can work with your body, with bacteria, with you name it, with germs, with whatever. So anything that involves some kind of like living material, recently deceased material, or some kind of collaboration with yourself and another life form in some way, that falls in the realm of bioart.
Got it.
Yeah.
Got it. And yeah, it sounds very Renaissance to me. Like the Renaissance, I feel like in Renaissance times, that was kind of the thing, is a science and art explosion at the same time. And it wasn't separate during that period.
It's like this very like steampunk, like Frankenstein type. Yeah, it depends on what it is, but yeah, and it incorporates a lot of like technology and science and like traditional and fine art all in one.
And how did you stumble into it, if that's how you would say it?
It was a happy accident. I came across bioart during my undergrad, which was a long time ago now. But I was missing a credit, like an upper level credit for my degree, and it needed to be in the arts. At the time I was doing a double major in communications, media and film, and visual arts. And I had like fulfilled all my other courses and all my degree requirements, but I needed like one or two more like upper level art courses, and bioart was a contemporary art class that was offered, and it fit my schedule, and it accomplished what I needed in my degree audit. So I was like, all right, looks like this is it. But I had also always been like curious about that class. It had just never aligned in my like course calendar or whatever. So it was like, you know, again, the stars aligning, so to speak. And so I took that class, and my mind was literally blown. Like, it changed everything for me. Everything changed for me in my practice, in my way of thinking, and just like the way I was perceiving the world around me. Like, it was so impactful. And part of it was like the course and the things I was learning and the way it was expanding my mind. But the other part of it was the instructor, and that's Dr. Jennifer Willett, who is, I've known her for the last 10 years. Like, I took this course like 10 years ago or something.
Wow.
Yes. It's been crazy. It's been a wild ride. But she's since been a great mentor, a friend, an advisor, a colleague. So like I've also worked with Jennifer for the last 10 years. And I think that's been part of the reason why my relationship with Bioart has been so fruitful, was because of having someone cheering me on of her caliber. And I think that makes a difference. I think that makes a huge difference. Because in my moments of like feeling very low, and you know, you always second guess yourself, especially like in a creative field. It's very, very difficult. It's really hard to make it. And so it's nice to have someone who's like years ahead of you, who can just sort of like calm these inner storms that you might have about yourself, or doubts or whatever. And she's been one of my biggest advocates and cheerleaders, and it's been amazing.
Cool.
Yeah, I've been very lucky.
Cool. What do you think about when you think about building a career in this sense? Just to speak for myself, anytime I hear the word art and career, it's like
Polar opposites.
yeah, exactly. Like, art is a hobby, it's not a career. It's just like, how do you
Phooey.
yeah, I'm just curious how I feel like there's such a strong social narrative about being an artist.
You know what?
What do you think of that? And has that ever gotten to your head? Does it like bring up emotions for you? How do you
gone to my head in what sense?
Like, have you ever believed it? That it's not a real career or a real job? And maybe I'm just sharing my own. Or have you surrounded yourself with enough people like Jennifer Willett that just busted through that?
Ooh, that's a tricky question. I'd say maybe when I was like in my teens, I probably felt like, because it's so instilled in you, and it's so like drilled in your brain from like society and like the people around you, your family, schools, like, you know, art is not a viable career that you can have a solid life out of, or, you know, like, you do art on the weekends, not for. But it's like, I can't help it. Like, I can't help how I feel, or like, I can't help how it makes me feel, or, you know, the life that it like brings out of me. So I always struggled with that. And I think as I got older and I started to surround myself with more and more artists, with more and more like creative people, cultural workers, just people that are really ingrained and invested in the arts and in the arts community, but also in the arts within like themselves and their own practices. And I think that was a big game changer for me, to be able to surround myself with people that had the mindset of, I'm gonna just do it and I'm gonna try. And not that failure isn't an option, but really failure is relative. We can talk about that later. But just people that were just so, like, just had this gusto of like, I know what I'm passionate about and I really want to give it a go. I think that was a big thing for me, because it really changed my perspective, and that narrative that I had in my head that was also like drilled in me as someone who was like always creative and was always interested in the arts, but sometimes the people around me, not that they weren't supportive, because I was always given support to exercise my creative ability, but again, more so from like a hobby, not as like a serious career pursuit or something like that. And then as I went through, a lot of it had to do with my university experiences, just being in the arts and surrounding myself with like professional artists and seeing that, hey, like, here are real, tangible people in front of me who have made a career out of being an artist, working in the arts, and doing what they love, and clearly being established and having a roof over their heads and being accomplished, and, you know, not being the quote-unquote fallacy of like the starving artist who's like living in a cardboard box. And, you know, like, I like nice things. I want nice things.
Yeah, the Mexican villa.
You know, I want to be in a Mexican villa. I want those things too. So, yeah, I wrestled with that a lot. But seeing is believing.
Totally.
Like, seeing legitimate people that I admired and respected and looked up to who were doing it, it changed everything for me. It's like, well, if they can do it, why can't I? You know, and at that point it was like, no one's really getting in the way of that but me. So, fuck it.
Yeah. Let's go to New York.
Yeah.
Do you want the windows down a little bit?
Oh my god, it's so hot in here.
It is getting steamy.
I am glistening.
Yeah. I said, like, do you have any stories that are kind of out of character for you? And you said recently less so because you feel like, in your words, have found your voice. So what do you mean by that, and what is it like to, like, just what did you mean by that?
Toughie. I think, you know, it takes time to come into your own voice and the things that interest you and the things that drive your core and the things that like align with you as a person and your character. And the older I get and the more experiences I have just in the world and the things that I'm doing on a day-to-day basis, but even like the projects I choose to take on in my artwork and my discipline, those over time define you to some degree and define like your values and your interests and et cetera. And so I think that the things that I choose to do now versus maybe some of the things that I was doing 4 or 5 years ago align better with who I am as an artist, as a person, as like Jude, as a being. So I don't feel like there's anything that I do or that I'm doing that feels intrinsically out of character in that. Does that make sense? Yeah,
I'm just curious. The follow-up question is just how did you get to that point?
I got to that point because I started saying no to the things that didn't give me that feeling, or like the things that incited something exciting in me or something like productive or proactive. You know, like sometimes you get asked to do a project and maybe it doesn't fit with the things that interest you or the concepts that you're researching or whatever, and it could be a great project, but it's like I'm not interested, or I don't care, or you know what I mean? So why should I don't want to say like waste my time, but waste my time and my energy. There's only so much energy and time that you have, so. And I just got to a point where I could say no to those things, and not out of like disrespect. It just, you know what, this sounds like a great opportunity, but it just doesn't really align with the things that I'm trying to do right now. So thank you, but no thank you. So
jobs, projects, collaborations, anything like that. Got it. That's smart. And would you say that it's like comes down to intuition and feeling truly? Like trusting your gut with those things and just your emotions?
Yeah, I think that's a big part of it, but I think the other part of it is like learning to understand yourself. But that just comes with time. Like I wouldn't have been in this place in my early 20s where I could be saying no to these projects or whatever for a number of reasons. A large part of it was like financial. I needed to take on certain jobs and whatever, even though they didn't necessarily fuel my fire and like give me this like, you know, the gusto. But I needed it for financial reasons, and I got to pay my bills and whatever. So that's one of them. But also I wasn't sure of who I was, and I was still trying to figure out who is Jude and what is she like and what are the things that drive her, and you know, just all of those questions that you ask yourself when you're coming of age and really trying to be the person that you envision yourself to be. And I was taking on a lot of different things and trying a lot of different things so that I could understand, even by like process of elimination. Well, I tried this and I didn't like it, So I know that I
That's
definitely
out.
don't want to do that.
Yeah.
But maybe if I try this and I like it, that'll give me some kind of like pathway to follow. Or so I was also taking on like a variety of projects and working with a variety of people and like really just trying everything to understand myself.
Tell me about coming to Canada.
Oh man, I was so angry.
Oh yeah?
I was not happy.
How old were you?
I was 15, 16. And I was unhappy because I was a teenager.
Oh yes.
And we had come here, my family had made like a very quick decision. I mean, also I was very young and I didn't quite understand the implications and the challenging decisions that my parents had to make for us to come here. So now that I'm older, now that I have a better sense of like what was going on at the time, I have much more sympathy and much more understanding as to why my family decided to relocate here. But at the time, I was very angry because I didn't understand. So we had been living in Kuwait. I was born and raised in Kuwait, but my family is Palestinian. So having lived in Kuwait my whole life, my grandparents also moved to Windsor early 90s. So we would, oddly enough, come to Windsor on holiday every summer or every other summer to visit. So Windsor wasn't this like foreign place, like this foreign ideology to me and my family. But visiting somewhere on holiday versus living there are two very different experiences, like night and day. And so at the time when we moved here, it was in the summer. And it was a decision that was made like in the span of like 2 to 3 weeks. So it felt very sudden. I'm sure my parents had been talking about it for a while, like between them, but it wasn't something that was really disclosed to the kids and shared with us. So when I was faced with the news of like, all right, pack up your things, we're leaving in like 2 weeks or whatever it was, you know, I felt like I was sucker punched. Like my whole world felt like it was falling apart. And Kuwait is a very affluent country, and a lot of my friends, a lot of the people that I grew up with, were also very affluent, and most of them wouldn't be in the country during the summer break. Like they would all be traveling and all be like gone on vacation and holiday somewhere. So none of my friends were in town at the time. So that was also so devastating for me.
You couldn't console with them,
because
that kind of thing?
I couldn't console with them. I couldn't say goodbye to them.
Oof.
So like that was really hard.
Yeah.
And I think that was like, those were the reasons that fueled my anger. And so when we,
it was not the best positive.
It was not positive at all. I was so upset. And my dad was really sick at the time. So, you know, like as a teenager, you're already wrestling like so many feelings with yourself and just like the world around you as you're coming of age. But add like all of these other experiences that your family is going through on top of it. It's a lot. And it felt like a lot. In hindsight, I mean, it is a lot, but you know, it was overly dramatized in my teenage brain.
As a teenager does, yes.
So, and I recognize those things, okay? I was dramatic. I get it. You have to laugh at yourself.
Yeah.
So, yeah, we moved here. I was pissed. I was mad at my parents. And eventually, oh, and here's the other thing. My brother and I, so I have an older brother and a younger sister, and my brother and I are closer in age, and there's like quite a bit of an age gap between us and my sister. She was like the surprise baby. So my brother and I ended up flying to Canada on our own, like without our parents. So 2 teenagers, like just like making this move by themselves, and our parents were back in Kuwait with my sister. My sister was like really young at the time. So she couldn't like she needed to be around our parents. And they stayed behind, just like packing up everything, selling stuff, like finalizing, you know, like getting ready for like the move. And then they followed suit maybe like 8 months later or something. Like it was quite some time.
I thought you said 8 days later.
No. So like that was another like traumatic thing to like feel this like separation during this like really like emotionally heightened time and blah blah blah. It just felt like it was so much. It was too much for my teenage brain to understand. So we were staying with my grandparents here, And again, you know, there's a big generational gap between like you as a teenager and your grandparents. And imagine like living with them, being in a household where you have like nowhere to go and nowhere and
No friends yet.
and no friends and no sense of freedom, and you don't really know the lay of the land. You don't have a license, you can't drive, you can't whatever, you can't do anything, and you're just like trapped in this house with these two amazing and loving people. But it's like I can't sit here and talk to my grandparents all the time. So I was a very upset teenager. Yeah.
I have a question that is like so small and not deep at all, but I'm so curious, and I think you've told me. Do you have, because from what I understand about languages, your accent kind of sets by the time that you are like 8 or 9, and I have friends who've like moved a little bit before and a little bit after, and their accent is like reflective of that. Like if they've moved after like 9 or 10 or so, like their accent's kind of like set like for life.
Yeah.
So do you have a Kuwait accent, or like what is there a Kuwait accent, or am I completely ignorant on this? Am I even asking the right question?
I get where you're trying to get, but I don't know what a Kuwait accent would be, a Kuwaiti accent would be. I went to a British school, so my entire education was like based on British educational system. A lot of my teachers were from the UK or from Europe, so they all had like a British accent.
Got it.
But then a lot of my like media consumption was both like British. Also, Kuwait was like colonized by Britain, so like there's a lot of like
influence,
history and deep-rooted influence there. So that's part of the reason. But then also my media consumption was equally like British and like UK, but also like American. So I think there's moments, I don't know what my accent is. I don't think I have an accent.
I didn't think you did. That was the point. Is like, what is your first language?
Arabic.
Oh, it is. Yeah. But you just learned English so early on. Interesting.
Yeah, my entire education was primarily in English, but you would take like Arabic classes and whatever. But my native tongue is Arabic. Like we speak Arabic at home mostly. Now it's more like a mix. You know. Yeah.
Got it.
I don't know.
I was curious.
Do I have an accent?
No, you don't. That was the point of the question, is that it seemed like it didn't fit, like someone who would move to Canada. No, I'm embarrassed that I don't know anything.
I don't know.
Kuwait.
What accent did you expect I would have?
Like a Middle Eastern accent, I guess. Do people from Kuwait have that accent?
Yeah, some people.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting. Yeah. I need to learn more about this country. Tell me about your parents.
Oh, my parents were lovely people. They were so kind and so generous and just fun and funny. My dad was a civil engineer, and he was a project manager for a lot of like these major construction builds in Kuwait. So he would be on a lot of like construction sites and just overseeing, like making sure that whatever needed to be done is happening on whatever timeline, or I don't know, I was a kid, but that's as far as I know. He was doing really well. He loved his work.
Good.
And my mom worked in like in business administration. And her last position, like she was very high up, and she was working for this like global mobile telecommunications company. It was like one of the biggest like mobile providers in the Middle East, but also like it's like European Middle Eastern country or company. Yeah, they were both like very well off. The other thing to keep in mind is like there's a lot of like socio-political barriers for people who are non-Kuwaiti citizens living in Kuwait.
Right.
And so being Palestinian, a lot of those barriers did exist for my family and for me. Even though my parents were born and raised there, I was born and raised there, my siblings were born and raised there. You don't get like naturalized citizenship. That does not exist.
In Kuwait specifically.
Yes, it doesn't exist.
And your parents were born and raised in Kuwait. Got it.
Yes.
Wow.
It's very complicated.
Yes, I can
existence.
imagine. Yeah.
Yeah, so like your entire identity is politicized from like the moment you are born and the moment you exist as a Palestinian. And so what that also means, if you're not a citizen, if you don't have the Kuwaiti citizenship, is a lot of the elite positions and the upper level positions, like in work, are reserved for Kuwaiti nationals. But that also means that there's a lot of like very qualified and very deserving people who are like held back by this glass ceiling. My parents being prime examples of that. So my parents had gotten as far as they could have possibly gotten in their careers. And the only barrier at that point would have just been that they're not citizens. That's the only reason why they could not advance any farther.
Got it.
Which is like, you know,
So
you
frustrating.
don't think about those things as a kid, and you don't. How could you think about those things? You don't understand, and it's not like your parents are going to talk to you about those things. But again, it's like as I get older and as I like have a better understanding of the world around me and the politics that surround me and my identity, these are the things that like reveal themselves, and it infuriates me. It's so frustrating. Like, my parents were brilliant and very capable and very ambitious, and they were so well loved in their community and their workplaces. And you mention either of their names and everyone just like beams, you know, like they were those people. So like I think about those experiences and just some of the barriers that exist for immigrants and those that are always labeled as the other, the outsider, the ones that don't belong. And those are some of the things that kind of like fuel my work and my art practice. So a lot of it stems from the things that I'm learning about my family and my previous life. And
I know so little about Palestinian conflict that I don't even know where even to begin there. I know that's a whole probably separate video.
Oh my God, Dan Brown.
But was the primary reason? My assumption is that, I guess, and this is coming from someone born in Canada, a white guy.
Oh God.
Is that like
This
from
is
what
gonna
I
be good.
from what I hear is like is it that idea of moving to Canada for a better life, for a better future where they can advance, or was it something different? That was okay.
That was part of it. The other reason was both my parents got sick around the time that we relocated. My mom was diagnosed with breast cancer. My dad had a brain tumor that for a long time was benign, and it was just this like tumor that his body produced, but it was nothing. And over the years it turned cancerous. And so they both got really sick, and they couldn't really work anymore. And it's a very expensive lifestyle. It's a very expensive just existence in Kuwait. Like you
to get treatment?
You can't get by even just on a day-to-day basis, especially if you're not a citizen, because all of these like government resources and support are reserved for those who are citizens, and we were not, unfortunately, despite like you know, the years
being
that
born there,
we had spent there, and like the service that like my family had provided to the country, and like lovingly, you know, it just it wasn't reciprocal, so to speak. And my grandparents had been in Windsor for a really long time, and so they figured, well, maybe it's time for us to leave, and maybe it's time for us to be like close to a different side of family that we haven't had the fortune of like living near. And it just worked out. It just worked out for us to relocate, and that was a big part of it, was that my parents were sick.
So what came to pass in the years after moving here?
Oh man, so much.
Yeah.
So much. So both my parents ended up passing away in Windsor, so I will always have this like deep-rooted connection to Windsor because my parents are buried here. You know, like they are here. They will always be here. And my grandpa too. My grandpa passed away not long ago, and he's also here. So I have this like very bittersweet relationship with Windsor. Over the years, you know, when I first moved here, I had this like aggression towards it, but it was not because of Windsor. It was because of the situation that led me to be in Windsor, and I recognize that. So it took me some time to like reconcile those feelings, and I love Windsor, and Windsor's been a great space for me to grow on a personal level, on a professional level. I've met some great people. I've also met some not so great people, but I think that happens everywhere you go. You know, I don't think this is like a Windsor specific issue. Both my parents passed, so that was a very difficult time. But I think all of these very like traumatizing and very tragic experiences have also shaped the way I make decisions now. And I just have this like fear of the what if, or the fear of like not trying something and being on my deathbed and wondering what would have happened, what might have been. My mom actually always wanted to be an optometrist, and she was studying in the UK, and I don't know what the name of the exam is, but you have to write some kind of like board exam or something to pass and like officially be an optometrist, or don't quote me on this, I don't know. But you know, you have to like pass some test,
the professional like
and
designation.
that is the thing where if you pass it, you're in, and if you don't, you're not. And she had been like studying and working so hard and doing that, and she took the test and she didn't pass. And not that she failed miserably, like I think it wasn't like, you know, it just like she was close but not close enough, you know. And it was like this earth-shattering thing for her, and she just like totally shut the door on that that hope and that dream. And I remember, like, you know, this is like, she must have been in her 20s when this happened. Like, she's young and still like trying to figure out what she's doing in life and whatever. And like years and years later, like just like towards the end, I think she knew that it was her time. I think she knew that she wasn't going to be around much longer, and that was one of the things that she brought up, you know, and it sticks with me. It's always stuck with me. Like, I don't want to be in that place. I don't want to be towards the end of my life wondering, like, what if I had rewritten that exam? What if I hadn't applied to RPI? What if I didn't ask for the funding? What if I, you know? So it's like, it seems very dramatic, but but this is based on like my like direct lived experience and like the very traumatic things that I've seen firsthand. And I just, like, my parents died so young, so young. And I don't feel like they truly got a chance to live like the full potential of their lives. Not because, I mean, to some extent, I think it was based off of the choices that they made and like not following the things that they might have necessarily felt so passionate about. And the other side of it is, it was just circumstance. They didn't control, like, how can you control getting sick? And how can you control those things? You know, that's totally out of their hands. And that's just, you know, the powers that be, like whatever you believe in. But I don't, like, if I ever come to that place in my life where I am sick or I get hit by a truck or whatever, I want to die knowing that I've lived a full life and I'm very content. And this is going to sound really fucked up, but at this very moment where I am sitting right now, if something was to happen and this tree outside fell over and like crushed me and I died, I would be fine. Like, I feel very content with the life that I've led. Even like as young as I am right now, like, I've lived a very full life. I've seen some shit. I've done some shit. And I feel good about it. Like, I think for me, I regret more so the things that I don't do than the things that I do.
Of course.
And I realized that at a very young age. But again, because of the cards that I was dealt in my life. And I don't think everyone gets the same, not everyone gets dealt the same hand. No one gets dealt the same hand. But I think for me, it's also how I like rectify the really shitty things that have happened in my life. And how I'm able to like get on with my day and not feel like crushed by the loss and grief of like very important people in my life and that type of thing.
I don't think that's a fucked up thing at all. I think it's an incredibly, I think about death a lot. And
Me too.
Oh, really? Yeah. Well,
Like,
I
all
would
the
understandably, I think, unfortunately.
It's
But
very morbid.
fortunately,
Yeah.
but I think, like, I have this really strong sense that the people who are the most in touch with death are the ones who are the most alive, because they have that feeling of, I think when the more you ignore death or try to block it out, the more you are actually dead day to day, because you're not in touch with that voice of how you truly want to be spending your time and your voice and your time on this that you have.
In a weird way, it's almost like I'm letting that fear drive me. Yes.
Do you have any other like lessons from your parents or around death that have stuck with you?
I've been more vocal to the people around me that like really are important to me or have been impactful or just about how I feel about them, because I feel like life is so short, and you know, I want to tell the people around me that I love that I do in fact love them, or you know, I don't want to like withhold those things, because you never know. You really never know. And if I was to die in this very moment, I want the people that I've spent time with, or you know, all those things that have been like impactful in my life, to know that they did in fact matter. And this small gesture, no matter how small it may seem in their mind, that they've done for me is something that like resonated with me. Or so I try to voice those things more and more, or I try to be more like attentive to those moments, like trying to be more present when something like that happens, being more grateful. Yeah.
You definitely seem like you have, might sound weird to you, but it really seems like you have your shit together in that way.
I don't.
Okay. I knew you were going to say that, but it, at least from like, not in being shit together as if like everything in your life is like perfectly in a row, not like that, but just in the sense that I think this is why I want to keep you in my life. It's just on a day-to-day basis, it seems like you are very much, I don't even know if I have words for this, like you are living life well in the best way that you know how. Yeah.
Honestly, I think I've just come to a point where I'm also not afraid to fail, whatever that means. Again, I think failure is relative, and I think you define what a failure is for yourself, or you allow society or whatever the voices around you to infiltrate and reflect what failure might be for you. And I don't think that those are all necessarily true. What you might deem to be a failure might not be one in my eyes, or vice versa. And I think that's a very important thing to keep in mind. And for me, I'm not afraid to try something and have it not work out. And I think that's been the biggest revelation I've had in the last few years, and it's really opened up so many doors for me. Like, you know, even just thinking back to in the context of like me moving and my PhD application, like, fuck it, I'm just gonna put my name in the hat, and what's the worst that can happen? I'm gonna ask for the money, and what's the worst that can happen? Like, I literally, what do I have to lose? Like my ego, my pride.
And on the other hand, it's like, if you don't do it, you'll always have that feeling of, what if I did?
And I think those lessons, I mean, they came at a very, very tough price.
Yeah.
You know, they came from my experiences of directly losing my parents and having to make very tough decisions around their loss. But again, I have to reflect and think about, well, there's a reason why these things happened in my life, and maybe it's because this was like the driving, like the catalyst that I needed to change my perspective and change the way that I think and the way I perceive the world and my actions and whatever, you know. Or at least in my mind and in my heart, that's how I not justify it, but like explain it to myself so that I can get out of bed every day and face my day, whatever that may be. And some days are extremely harder than others, and other days I don't feel like I have to put in that much like thought and effort. It just sort of like flows and it just happens. But I have to be mindful about it.
Do you consider yourself spiritual?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would say so.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah, I believe in like this energy that you embody, and how what you put out is what you receive, and that the people that you surround yourself can really like affect and reflect your energies and your moods. And you know, it's true. Like, think about it. Think about like a time where maybe you had some very exciting news to share, and who are the people that you want to share that news with versus the people that you don't, and why?
That's a great question to check in with yourself. Yeah, I like that.
And I think that's an important thing to reflect on, like in terms of the people that you surround yourself, but also like who you are as a person. Do people often come to me and want to share these like joyful moments, or are people only coming to me to share like, I don't know, something that's like more deflating, and why, and what am I doing, and how can I think about those things a lot. And I want to be someone who like people are excited to share like good news with, like fuck yeah, I'm excited for you, like this is amazing, you know. And then I try to surround myself with people like that too. And that's not to say that I've like built this echo chamber and this bubble of like these like pseudo like positive people. That's not the case. I also like have people that call me out on my bullshit and critique me and keep me. Is there a book or a talk or a quote that is really meaningful to you, or something that you keep going back to? Oh man. Or that you wish you found earlier? Yes. What? I'm rereading, oh man, I think it's by Gary Chapman, The 5 Love Languages. I'm rereading that book for like the 3rd time. Okay. And though it's like written for like heterosexual married couples, which I'm not married, and like written from that perspective and for that audience, I think it also applies to a lot of different aspects in one's life. Just thinking about like this idea of filling up your tank before you can fill up someone else's, and the different ways and modalities in which we express love and care and affection. I think, I've been checking in with myself about that. What are your love languages? I'm definitely acts of service. And it's supposed to be like the receiving is the same as the giving, or like my way of showing someone that I love is I do things for you. Like, you know, if I know, help you move. Yeah, that kind of stuff. I'll help you move. I'll help you whatever. If I know you're having a busy day, I'll bring you a cup of coffee, or just you know, that and like quality time is big for me. And that means that you like to receive it in that way as well. Like you like to receive those things. Got it. Yeah, I do those things, and I like to receive those things. Cool. Yeah, so I've been thinking a lot about those. Like, those are the things that are going through my mind, and what I'm currently reading or rereading. I'm going scuba diving tomorrow. Where? I'm taking a scuba lesson. I've always wanted to get my scuba license, and I bought this Groupon like years ago for like an intro, like discovery scuba. So I bought this Groupon years ago, forgot about it, and I've been going through like, you know, you like acquire gift cards and things over the years, and I have this like stash of them, and I'm like, oh my god, I have to use all of these before I leave on Saturday. So I called restaurants, horseback riding. Yes, seriously, that's what's happening. Tomorrow, listen to my day tomorrow. I'm going for a facial and a pedicure, and these were like gifts that I got like for Christmas, like a gift card a long time ago. I'm like, who am I? I'm going for a tarot card reading. And then I'm going for a scuba lesson. Wow, this is my life as an artist, kids. You can totally make it. You're so free. Like, what is my life? Do you have any other moments? I'm sure you do. Where you're just like, what is my life right now? Yeah. What comes to mind? Oh my goodness, I have so many, which is amazing. Like, it's so amazing. My work right now is at the Ontario Science Centre. And that came to be because I got invited to be part of a pilot residency program between the Museum of Contemporary Art Toronto and the Ontario Science Centre. And it was the first time that these two like huge Canadian organizations and institutions were collaborating to bring 2 artists that would be in like an incubated residency at MOCA for like a duration of 3-4 months or however long, and then the culmination of the work that was created would then be exhibited at the Ontario Science Centre. And it was really the first time that these 2 institutions were talking in the context of how can art and science collaborate together, and like fine arts and science. And so they picked me to be like one of the guinea pigs, and so I got to do a residency at MOCA in the fall last year, and the work that I made was installed around like January of this year, and it's still up at the Ontario Science Centre. It's huge. Like somehow I talked them into letting me have free reign over this like huge series of like windows. It's almost like an atrium, and the artwork that I made, it's this installation that's sort of like a curtain, and I was thinking a lot about like the domestic space and what are the strategies that immigrants and like newcomers take to make a place feel more and more like home. And so I walk into the space at the Ontario Science Centre, and it's just very gray and concrete and sterile, and so immediately I'm like, I need to like make this place feel more homey and like domesticize it. And how can I do that? And I see these like gigantic windows that are like, I don't know, like 60 feet high or something. Like it's stupid, like huge, and there's so many panels of them, and I'm like, is there any way I could like do something with these windows? And they said yes.
That goes back to asking again for what you want. Yeah.
And I'm becoming better and better at like letting that fearful voice in the back of my head just like silencing it and like just fuck it.
Just say it. Yeah.
Like, what are they gonna say? No. I still get to make an artwork at the OSC, and you know, it'll still get exhibited there. It doesn't negate my residency. I still do all those things. It's just I might have to reconfigure this idea that I had in my brain. So anyways, long and short of it, they gave me free reign of these windows. I ended up designing these like curtain panels that are maybe like 40 or 50 feet long, like huge, like just they really engulf your body. And so it's like this large scale installation in this atrium space that's been hanging there since January, and I think it's going to be up there for quite some time.
That's amazing. And
when I went and I saw it installed for the first time, I just had this moment of like, holy shit. Like, wow, like this is my work. And it's huge and it's real. Those are the moments where I have like, oh my god, what is my life? Like, is this real? Is this actually happening? And it happens a lot, you know. It happens in a lot of the different places that my work is exhibited. I always get so excited, and it's always like a proud moment for me. Like when I was in Mexico, the same thing, like my work was installed. It was a different body of work, but to see also my work translated in Spanish and like my bio and stuff, seeing it in English and seeing it in Spanish, and I didn't realize that like they would be doing that. So that was also a very, it was a surreal moment, you know,
no kidding.
To see your work translated for a totally new audience. And like it was really cool.
And that you can touch people who don't speak the same language as you. And
having people come up to me during or after like receptions, or like once they realize that I'm the artist behind this work or whatever, and to have them like thank you because they feel touched by your work, or that it resonates with them and their experiences. I think that's like the most gratifying moment of all. Like even more gratifying than seeing my work professionally installed or whatever. It's,
to hear how it affected someone else.
It's like, my work here is fucking done.
Check. Check. So tell me about a time that you were recently terrified to do something but did it anyway, and let go of that voice of fear.
I'd say my most recent experience with that would be my entire move and application for the PhD program. And it was like a duality of fear. It was like the fear of rejection. You know, I don't want to be rejected. I don't want to, like, that hurts, and it feels like, well, is there something missing from me or my work, or, you know, it always instills some doubt to some degree. no matter how strongly or how confident I feel about my work, that always like drives something in my mind. So like there's that concern, but then also the concern of like I have a legitimate shot at this opportunity, and then I could get accepted. Like it was a real thing, and then I was afraid of what would happen if I did in fact get accepted and I did get the funding, because then that will totally change the trajectory of my life. That's huge.
I just got a bit like an aha as you were saying that right now, is I think that's what stops people from taking action, because once you set yourself in motion a certain direction, either outcome will be disruptive.
Yeah.
If it's good, it'll cause disruption, and if it's bad, it'll still like hurt.
Yes.
You know what I mean? So I think a lot of the time when people don't take action, it's because they'd rather stay with their...
You're content and
they're familiar.
You're comfortable. So why
rock the boat one way or the other? Yeah.
If it's not broken, why fix it?
Right. That was big. That makes total sense. Because people would always understand, like I hear the term like afraid of success, and it's like, I don't know, isn't that what you want? But I get, when it comes to like,
I'm not afraid of the success itself.
Yes.
I'm afraid of the things that I have to do to acquire that success. And having to uproot my entire life again and close out everything that I've built for myself here in Windsor and in Canada. Like I'm moving to a new country, and that also is like terrifying to me and concerning for many reasons, which I will not get into. But you know, it's like every part of my life, everything in my world that I've come to know and come to not have to think about is now changed. I don't know what grocery store to go to. I don't know, like those little things that you like take for granted. I have to relearn
from scratch. And and like to not have I don't know if safety net's the right word, but to have like a room in a parent's house or stuff in storage in a basement, like you're saying, how
I don't have that comfort, and I don't have that luxury. And it is a luxury, you know, to be able to move somewhere and relocate and try out something new and have like the comfort of your parents as your home base, like, or having the luxury of being able to keep some boxes in your parents' attic or basement, or like, I don't have that. I have to close out my entire life here and pack every single thing and bring it with me. Like, that's it. Windsor is no longer my home base. Like, I don't exist in Windsor. And that was a very scary feeling and thought, because for a long time, after some time, Windsor became home to me. And I still feel like Windsor is my home for a number of reasons. So that was a tough thing to wrestle with. Making the decision to even apply and possibly get accepted. Put that in jeopardy in a way. Yeah, it risked my sense of comfort and my home that I worked so tirelessly to like build for myself here.
And last question is, when was the last time you cried tears of joy?
It was when I got my funding for my PhD, and it was like this feeling of, I was just so overwhelmed and like so overcome with emotion and like genuine like gratitude and excitement, and it slowly turned into like the fear of like, oh shit, like it's happening. Like all those things that I was afraid of when I was afraid of applying are now here. You know, like the fear of moving, the fear of starting over, the fear of just being the other, being the new person, having to relearn all the things that you don't think you have to relearn as an adult, and just like starting anew. It's a lot. It's like big changes in a short time. So yeah, it started out as joyful, and then it was like, oh my
back to real life with the logistics. Yeah. There's no going back now. Yeah. Especially because it's in like just a couple more days.
Yeah.
And just last thing is, do you have any parting thoughts or something that you would have people do or to keep in mind as we wrap this up?
I know we had talked about this also briefly earlier, but again, I think about my experiences as a student, even with some of my graduate teaching assistants and some of the things that they imparted on me that really impacted my life, even though they might have not realized how impactful the things that they said or the things that they showed me or the things that I learned from them were. And I think about the person that I am now is like who I would have liked to be for my younger self, or for those that I not just like see myself in, but like a younger version, but just like being this, you know, like a big sister or whatever. And like that's really important to me. I'm still trying to figure out, I don't know why exactly it's important to me, but it is. And I don't know if I need to understand why it's important to me. It's a good thing, I think. So I'm just going to keep doing it.
Well, you're definitely doing it by example.
Yeah. And I hope that even if it's like one, I don't know, if it affects some person, even one person, like positively, like hearing my story or my experiences and taking away one positive thing that could impact someone's life, even the slightest bit, I think that's good enough for me. And yeah, I think about those GAs that I had, and I hope that I was the same when I was a GA for like some of my students, like during my MFA, and I hope to continue that even in my PhD career, like having to work as a GA there, and some of the students that I will encounter. And I think it's also a reciprocal learning experience, and you have to open yourself up for that. Like, yes, sure, I'm older and wiser and more experienced or whatever, but that also means nothing, because your lived experiences, though they could be like wildly different, can still positively impact me, and I have something to learn from you. And I think like also opening myself for that has impacted my world. So yeah, I don't know, just like being open to receiving and giving, I think is key. And redefining what failure means for oneself, and not letting that get in the way of some of the things that, like personal goals or aspirations that we set for ourselves, and the things that we want to see for our own like future or whatever. Yeah, just so much. So much.
Thank you for doing this.
Thank you for having me.
You are just such a beautiful person.
Thank you.
And it makes me so happy to see any material success or career accomplishments. Is like, it's just good seeing good people do well and win. It just is like, hey, there's good in the world, and I get that from you. And I think even if you had zero accomplishments, whatever that means, again, whatever failure meant, just your actions and your attitude and your love are so strong, and you have grown so much in the years that I've known you. I'm so pumped for you to move.
Come visit me.
I will. I haven't been to New York yet, and I definitely want to. I know you're like an hour outside of Manhattan. No, more than that.
I'm a few hours,
couple hours
away, but it's like very accessible. Like I'll be there all the time.
Cool. That sounds like a fun thing. We'll see if scuba diving happens. I'll make it happen if it can.
Yes.
And yeah, it's one of just hearing that you're moving is like a bittersweet thing for me. I think it's more sweet than bitter.
Good.
It's kind of like fly away.
I know, but we'll still be in touch, and we will visit, and I still have some like business and work and projects ongoing in like Windsor and Toronto,
you'll be in town and around,
I will be in town.
Yeah, it's a good thing. It feels right.
I have a residency cooking up here, so
Stay tuned.
I will be back.
And then last thing of all is, where can people find out more about you?
You can follow me on my unprofessional Instagram, Jude Where's My Car, or you could look me up on my website, which needs updating, judeaz.com.
Solid.
Cool.
Okay, bring it in. And safe travels. Thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. And see you next time. I notice everyone does that before we start. It's nice that it's built in, right? It's like a traveling TV studio.